Now, Reverend, one thing, regardless of what people might think about yourself or the CDP in Australia, one thing that no one can argue is that yourself and the CDP have been strong crusaders against illegal drugs. Now, can you tell us a little bit about why you're so strong in that campaign and what drives that passion?
Well, Chris, I'm very concerned about illegal drugs because of the damage they do to young people and the damage they do to their minds, to their brains. And that's why the Bible talks about having the helmet of salvation. And I think God created us and created a marvellous machine, our brain. And drugs can do so much damage to it, particularly marijuana, pot. A lot of people say, look, it's a harmless recreational drug. Why are you opposed to that? We should legalise it, let everybody have their own pot whenever they want to. What they don't realise is that the marijuana is an insidious drug and it destroys the parts of the brain that are so important, and the part that it destroys is what's called the decision-making part. It actually waters down, undermines your ability to actually make decisions. So the person who regularly uses marijuana, after a while, doesn't know they've been so affected, and in fact they're convinced, and I know this because I've talked to people using pot, and they say, it doesn't affect me, Fred, it doesn't affect me. They've got no idea the damage it's done to them, because the part of the brain that does evaluations, makes decisions, is no longer functioning. And so the drug deadens that part which God has given to us, like a red light flashing. You're in trouble, fella, stop doing this. And that's why it's so easy, once a person's used marijuana for a while, the decision-making process is broken down. So when somebody says, look, are you really enjoying the pot? Oh, I don't get as much out of it as I used to. Oh, look, fella, try this. And he gives them a hard drug, gives them heroin. And normally, if you had went up to that young person and said, who's never used drugs, and so, here's a needle, here's heroin, I reckon you ought to inject it. The guy said, not with your life, wouldn't he? He'd punch him in the face. Don't push me into drugs. But once the marijuana has conditioned him, it's very easy to say the next step. And that's why marijuana is called the gateway drug. I know some social workers don't like that term. I believe it's absolutely true. I've hardly met anyone who uses heroin who did not first use marijuana. That the pot is what opened the door to the harder drug, and of course that means the end of their life. Usually at some point there's an overdose, some serious problems, and all the potential that God had in that young person's life, which I love, that potential is there, to do great things, is destroyed. And I get so angry when I read of a young person found in the gutter of King's Cross with a needle in their arm. And I get so angry about the guy who supplied the drugs, the people who talked that young person into it, and so on. And that's why I crusade against illegal drugs every chance I get.
The scary thing is, though, there are some members in the New South Wales Parliament that you're in that are actually have a much lighter stance and are almost, or they may be for the legalisation of marijuana. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. The Green Party supports it, and the problem is, if the politicians themselves have used it, that has affected their decision-making abilities. And that's why they think the drug's harmless. I get suspicious whenever I get a politician who's trying to convince me you ought to legalise it, that it's harmless. In the back of my mind I think, are you a user? And I reckon he is a user, or she's a user. And I know for a fact they did a test in Parliament the other day. Apparently they can do tests now, particularly to trace cocaine, and they said they found traces of cocaine in all the toilets of Parliament House. People are sniffing cocaine. Well, the only people who use those toilets are politicians or their staff. They're not for the public. And so it's a very serious problem. We've got people using drugs, making laws about drugs. And that's why I get myself in a big fight with them, these ones who are permissive and are using drugs, because they're convinced it's a great thing. And I fight them tooth and nail. And I won't mention some of the names, but there's been one or two politicians recently charged. One guy who was using marijuana, but he would pick up a young boy and say to him, would you like to have some pot? Get them involved, take them back to his office and have sex with them as well. So the drugs are a gateway to manipulating young people and getting them involved in sexual activity with adults where they're just exploited.